Is people power emerging in Iraq? Protesters demanding an end to corruption storm parliament and tear down concrete walls in the heavily fortified green zone. Can they help end the political crisis, or will they make it worse? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Fauziah. Ibrahim. Anti-government demonstrations in Baghdad have turned violent after months of relatively peaceful protests. A state of emergency has been declared across the Iraqi capital following the storming of the Green Zone. The heavily fortified area is home to government headquarters and foreign embassies and has been closed to most Iraqis for 13 years. On Saturday, angry citizens tore down walls, called government leaders corrupt and cowardly, and demanded their immediate resignation. The demonstrators say they're tired of waiting for Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi to follow through on his promise to name a new government.
Today is the last chance for the Iraqi Parliament and the government. Accept the complete technocrat ministry changes that don't stall. We'll continue to protest and sit in until the complete changes are made.
The whole government should go and leave our country and go back from where the US brought them. This is what we want. If there are no reforms, the whole government should be replaced and go back to where it came from and bring back all the money they stole.
So just what do the protesters want? Well, they're demanding that Parliament approve a long-delayed cabinet that had been proposed by Prime Minister Abadi in an effort to curb corruption. He wants to replace long-time politicians with technocrats and academics. The demonstrators also want changes to the current system of ethnic and sectarian quotas in Parliament. Iraqi politicians are accused of regularly using the quota system to amass wealth and influence. But the proposed reforms have been met with continued resistance from Parliament members. The Prime Minister has warned the political crisis will eventually hamper the Iraqi military campaign against ISIL. Let's bring in our guests now. Joining us from Baghdad is Iraqi MP Dhiaa al-Asadi. He is the head of al-Sadr's al-Ahrar Parliamentary Bloc. From Amman, we have Ghassan al-Atiyyah. He is the author of The Making of Iraq and is the head of the Iraqi National Initiative. That's a new secular liberal group from across sectarian lines. Joining us from Canterbury is Patrick Coburn. He is the Middle East correspondent for the Independent newspaper and the author of numerous books about the region, including Moqtada al-Sadr, the Shia revival, and the struggle for Iraq. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. Mr. al-Asadi, if I could start with you, you being part of al-Sadr's political bloc, explain to us, what do the Sadr supporters hope to achieve while storming the parliament?
Well, thank you very much, and my greetings to you and to my friend Dr. Ghassan and Mr. Patrick Coburn. Actually, those who stormed the parliament building yesterday were not just from the Sadr's movement or followers of Independent al-Sadr. They were from all Iraqi walks, and they have been protesting and demonstrating for months now. Their main demand was to make the reform that was promised by Prime Minister Dr. Haider al-Abadi. And it took a long time in order to make this reform effective. Although he promised that an entire change in the cabinet will take place, but unfortunately he was very reluctant and very hesitant sometimes to change the ministers who are supported by political parties. And we believe not, the bloc, the political bloc, and the demonstrators and Sayyid Moqtada al-Sadr, we all believe that this is the very system, the very principle upon which the political process was established since 2003, the system of quota or the apportionment, in which every political party protects its member in the cabinet or its minister in the cabinet, and preventing the parliament from bringing those corrupted people or the ministers who were unable to deliver the services they were expected to deliver and perform the plan they have been implemented. to bring them into accountability. The parliament failed because it was the case that all political parties were protecting their followers. Now we are calling for an independent cabinet, a cabinet that is represented by technocrats, by people who come from the different Iraqi components, but not necessarily nominated by political parties.
If I could just stop you there and just bring in Mr. Coburn here, Mr. Patrick Coburn. Now, you know, Mr. al-Asadi there obviously has a good point that Haider al-Abadi, the Prime Minister, hasn't been able to bring through these changes that he's proposed for the longest time. Is that a reflection of a weak leadership or the fact that he's up against a lot of obstacles in Parliament?
It's both. It's a weak leadership, but also it's difficult for anybody who's attempting to take the initiative or be a leader in Iraq to carry out reforms. And even if there are technocrats appointed, how much power would they have within the ministries in which they've been given charge? The problem would be, just as al-Asadi just said, that when you have that level of corruption, how would they deal with the existing corrupt officials and the general dysfunctional nature of Iraqi government? It's not impossible to do, but it's very difficult to do.
I want to bring in Mr. Al-Atiyyah here. It's very interesting. You said in a particular interview at one point, the U.S. occupation after the fall of Saddam Hussein is undoubtedly the root of all the present evil. The Americans effectively demolished the Iraqi state and couldn't build a new one that guarantees all citizens equal rights, regardless of their religion and ethnic origin. Are you then proposing that the Iraqis scrap the system that is currently in place altogether? Or are you proposing that they work with it but adapt it to their own needs?
Thank you. Best wishes to my friends. The point is, in Iraq, a change is demanded by almost most of the Iraqis, especially those out of the power. But the question, how could they effect such a change? The possibility could be, as from a historical point of view, by popular revolution, and this couldn't happen in a situation where the Iraqi are divided on sectarian ethnic lines. Or there will be a military coup d'etat, but again, we hardly have a military to stand or to initiate a coup, but because then we will have the mobilization force which could counter it. Third, some Iraqis will say, let somebody come and occupy us as the American and rectify their mistakes. But I doubt there is any leader in the whole world who is willing to commit such a folly by occupying Iraq. So ultimately, we have Iraqis, the ball in our court. We have to devise a way to enhance the situation, to improve it. And from this point of view, failure of the sectarian parties and the ethnic parties in moving Iraq forward in security and prosperity, this created an atmosphere for change. The change could be initiated through the present parliament, because I am personally involved with so many of them. They feel that the parliament, the member of parliament, that they are alienated, that their own leaders couldn't care less about their own party, they don't consult them, and they treat them just as a herd to simply to obey them. Two, they failed that the masses are really very angry with them. As you have seen yesterday, they have, 3 Iraqi MPs were shouted, were hit by the crowds because they are angry with them.
Now let's take a look at this very influential man who's able to gain so many supporters. Many of the protesters have been mobilized by Moqtada al-Sadr. Now, al-Sadr's following has grown quickly over the past month, but he remains a controversial figure. He first rose to prominence when he launched a Shia rebellion against US troops in 2003. The uprising led to accusations that he was a destabilizing force who stoked sectarian tension. Now, Sadr leads a grassroots party popular with the working class. And he heads a militia, formerly called the Mehdi Army and now renamed the Peace Brigades. It deployed gunmen during protests last month. Sadr's rising popularity has put him at odds with other Shia leaders, including Prime Minister Abadi. Mr. Coburn, if I could bring you into this discussion. Now, Moqtada al-Sadr has renamed his militia as the Peace Brigade. He's rebranded himself as the great unifier of the Iraqi people. Is he the leader of the Iraqi people, or is he positioning himself to be the next kingmaker?
I think all these sort of talk of political manipulations really don't mean a lot, who is a kingmaker in Iraq. The answer is that everybody has a bit of power in Iraq, but nobody has overwhelming power.
It certainly does seem to be an internal frustration that has manifested itself in this, what many people are starting to call people power, or people movement, shall we say. Mr. al-Asadi, how does this storming of the parliament actually reflect on Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi? Some people may say, well, it gives him more power to make the changes that he wants to make. Others say this shows him as a weak leader.
Well, Dr. al-Abadi was trying to tell everybody that the demonstrators and the protesters are always supporting him. And he also tries to consider the speeches delivered by by representatives of the Grand Ayatollahs in Najaf, particularly by the representatives of Grand Ayatollah al-Sistani. He's trying to use these speeches as an indication, as a direct support to his government. Also, he's trying to tell all political parties that the street is standing with me, and the people who are rallying in the streets are also supporting me. Up to the point that even in the process of changing the cabinet, although there are some political parties who are objecting this process, they wanted to have their say in the process of change. He wanted to tell everybody that I'm doing this because the street is calling for this. But there would be a point when Dr. al-Abadi realizes that his hesitation or his not being able to bring the change that he promised since the start of his mandate, it would be a tremendous mistake. It would be a very big challenge to his position. People might start, although some of them have already started calling for an entire change, including the Prime Minister. But those who he considers as supporters would turn into protesters against him, because the longer promised process of change has taken very long road, and this road sometimes threatening the existence of Iraq, threatening the unity of the Iraqi people. What happened yesterday, despite the fact, and I agree entirely with the point that Patrick raised, the positivity of the whole process, there are certain additional positive points, but also there are certain negative points. It is the first time that civilians stormed the green zone in this number. And everybody knows that the green zone contains all the sensitive and very official places, the Prime Minister's office, the Parliament, and the Council of Ministers also. All these offices are now under the control of people if they want to enter the green zone once again. Thousands of people decide that they should stay in the green zone, and they will not leave it until their demands are addressed by the government or by Dr. Haider al-Abadi. So he has to consider this very carefully.
Now, Mr. Abadi's changes have been spurred by the rampant corruption in Iraq. So let's take a look at just how corrupt Iraqi politicians are. Now, the estimates of the amount of money lost to bribery and fraud vary widely. Last year, an official investigating corruption said that $500 billion disappeared in the 8 years between 2006 and 2014. That was when Nouri al-Maliki was Prime Minister. Now, last month, the same official said the Defense Ministry spent $150 billion in the last decade, but only $20 billion worth of weapons had been brought. The rest, he said, has been stolen. A senior member of that anti-corruption committee recently admitted that he was himself corrupt and had taken bribes. Theft is so widespread that Transparency International ranked Iraq as one of the world's most corrupt countries last year, ranking the country number 161 out of 168. Now, bribery is common, with Iraqis having to pay to secure jobs, permits, and avoid being given a traffic ticket. Mr. Al-Atiyyah, if I could bring you in here, just explain to us, how is it that rampant corruption is allowed to go unchecked and so rife amongst political elites in Iraq?
It's basically because of the sectarian and the quota system. And accordingly, if a minister to finance his party will utilize the contract at whatever he has and to take portion of it to commission to his own party. And this was done by all parties. I couldn't exclude any one of them. And they justify this as a way, only way to strengthen their parties. The question now, how can we effect a change? A change, they will not allow it. And it's rightly said, if you just change the prime minister or the minister, this will not be enough, because corruption has gone down to the roots. From this point of view, the way to change this, it will take time. And the time at the longer process, we have to start with the process, not simply changing X or Y. The process is, if we succeeded in Iraq, and the ball now in the Iraqi court, every country, even Iran, is now really frustrated with the Iraqis and how they are difficult to deal with. To start with, the opening is to establish a new government of independent expertise. Those who will announce
can I just
publicly
interrupt
that
you
they will
and
not
say, are you suggesting that you abolish the sectarian and quota system?
Absolutely. I will tell you how. Now it is the change in Iraq with the Shia Islamists taking the upper hand and ruling Iraq. They made mess of Iraq. And the Iraqi Shia in the south are in a worse situation for the last 100 years. So now those who came on the back of the Shiite or the Sunni, they failed. They didn't deliver. Only the extremists benefit. And without this policy, Daesh or the Islamic State wouldn't flourish, because they created the environment which the extremists could enjoy and attract others. From this point of view, now Iraqis, nobody will save us. Only we Iraqis have to change our course. What happened recently, that the masses Iraqi who are really frustrated, they demonstrated last year, but then unfortunately, al-Maliki government crushed them. They were liberal, secular, and others. The Sadrs didn't join them, but they were crushed because they didn't have enough force in the parliament or otherwise. Now, thanks to the Sadrs, they spearheaded and provided sort of protection to the demonstrators. And in this sense, the question is, what do they want? So far, they are talking about slogans. We need honest government, no quota. But what I am proposing, and the group that we are working with in Amman and Baghdad, is to have a new government, preferably headed by a non-party member. And we are hoping that al-Abadi will leave his party and act as an independent. Those independent personnel are there in Iraq. They will take the job of a transitional cabinet to do the following: prepare the ground for a new election.
Mr. Atiyyah, we're just running out of time here. I want to bring in Mr. Coburn here. Would you agree with Mr. Atiyyah that there is a need to abolish the quota, the sectarian and quota system, and to bring in technocrats? That being the case, how will that even solve the sectarian divide that Iraq has to deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Look, it's not going to solve the sectarian divide in Iraq, but this has deep historic roots. Lots of people are being killed. But that's also true of, Northern Ireland here, between Roman Catholics and Protestants. It's true in a lot of the world. It's not just an Iraqi thing. But how do you mitigate it? How do you prevent it turning into, killings and massacres? 741 Iraqis were killed in April, and that's a big improvement on the month before. How do you reduce the level of atrocities? And I think you can go quite a way to this. It's not going to happen, not overnight, but within years. But a government which is more functional, make it more difficult for corrupt contracts. So, there used to be systems, even under Saddam, cabinet committees. You couldn't just drive a corrupt contract through because you knew somebody in the Prime Minister's office.
Right.
That sort of thing needs to be done, that there are immediate practical reforms that need to be implemented. And there are longer term reforms that you don't have this patronage system which people get jobs regardless of their effectiveness and with a completely dysfunctional government. So I think that there are movements towards this. And I think what's happening now, it could take a wrong turn. It could turn to more violence, but it is an indigenous Iraqi movement, so far peaceful, with mass support, and that must be positive in the context of Iraqi politics.
Mr. Atiyyah, I want to come back to you and ask you, even if, as you suggest, technocrats are introduced into the parliament as ministers, how does that address the sectarian divide in Iraq? That, as Patrick Coburn said, is a deeply divided issue, deeply historic issue.
Absolutely. The question is a long process. We have to put the train on the rail. To start with, Iraqi needs a new trend, a new bloc, we have Shia, Sunni, Kurd. So far, we don't have a bloc which identifies himself as Iraqi, not in name, but in the content of the group. Now, with the defection of more than 30 Iraqi MPs, Shia, Sunni, even Kurds, into a new bloc, so the emergence of a new cross-sectarian bloc, this is the beginning. That's one. Two, a government, transitional government, which will declare openly they will not stand for election, they will be only transitional, and they will take steps to make sure that the new election will be fair and free. Three, they will take steps with the help of the West, with the neighboring country, to revive the economy. The world will give us money only when they see legitimate, viable government. That will happen this month in Tokyo. Third, we have to fight Daesh or Islamic State. We cannot fight them with our back battle in Baghdad the way it is. So such a government needs the support of different groupings. Now, who will stand against it? Definitely those who will invested interest. The extremists will stand against it. But now there's an awareness that without such a government, Iraq is finished.
Mr. al-Asadi, I want to give you the last say here. We're just running out of time. We still have the Sadr supporters there. They've stormed the parliament. They're still occupying the green zone. What next if they don't get their demands met?
The existence of the followers of Moqtada al-Sadr are the Iraqi people. Actually, as I said in the beginning, they are not necessarily the followers of Moqtada al-Sadr. Their main demand is a new government, a cabinet that is composed of technocrats, of people who are qualified, who are not going to be protected by their political leaders if they
I understand,
do
but
any mistake.
My question is, what happens if their demands are not met?
They will practice all the pressure they can peacefully and within the constitutional laws. They are not going to violate laws. They are going to use all the human rights they have got, and they will have support by some of the parliament members, including al-Ahrar Bloc. There are people inside the parliament who are completely satisfied with this activism. They would like also to have a new bloc formed inside the parliament in order to have a bloc or a new actually political entity that transcends the boundaries of sectarianism and of ethnicity. So all the pressure that can be practiced is a way of changing the current government or to rectify things. And
that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for a very vigorous, interesting debate. Thank you to all our guests, Dhiaa al-Asadi, Patrick Coburn, as well as Ghassan al-Atiyyah. Thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter, our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Fauziah, Ibrahim, and the whole team here, bye for now.